high categories and everything. Let's just speak about something which is the very, very basic understanding, and very often a student of consciousness is introduced into these categories at the very beginning. So essentially speaking, and universally recognized, they are 4 states of consciousness. 3 of them, as it were, relative states of consciousness, and only 1 is permanent, and for that reason it is called beyond, or transcendental, or Turiya in Sanskrit. The other 3, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states of consciousness is literally that what dresses this whole phenomenon of experiencing. It is being characterized by different frequency of vibration in the brain coherence, in the activity of the brain. It is measurable, and there are names for that. Each particular waves predominate. The body is either actively and acutely awake, or feels like going to sleep. And then the dreaming state comes in, and we watch dreams. And then even that ceases, and there is a sleepless state known as deep sleep. There are no dreams. Everything is blank. What it is, right? Let's speak a little bit about the specifics of each state and how they are characterized. The waking state of consciousness is characterized by the acuity of the senses and the mind. In other words, it's the full body-mind coordination working intact. Waking state of consciousness. Senses are active, supplying the mind with the information about the environment. Piece of cake. Simple thing, right? Then, after a while, mind is active, senses are active. Nervous system gets tired. So it cannot vibrate at that frequency anymore. It needs to change frequency. And we become drowsy, sleepy, tired. We need to lie down and sleep. And another state of consciousness kicks in. Dreaming state of consciousness. I'm avoiding the Sanskrit terminology here. It's not necessary for you. It's easier for you to grasp it that way. So, what is dreaming state of consciousness characterized by? The absence of the working of the senses. Mind abides on its own in the realm of dreams. Senses are simply withdrawn. In yoga, this is known as spontaneous pratyahara. Normal, like pratyahara on a daily basis, withdrawal of the senses from the respective organs of cognition. And mind is left on its own to wander, and that's what is the phenomenon of dreaming really is. That's why in dreams we do the impossible, in a sense that what defies the laws of gravity, we can fly, we can do, have amazing encounters, you know. Or our dreams could be realistic, just like the same what happens here just happens in the dream state, right? But the point is here is that senses are not acting. They are idle. Mind is left on its own to wander. Then, after a while, even that state gives way to another state, known as deep sleep state of consciousness. And deep sleep state of consciousness characterized by absence of senses and mind. Everything is now withdrawn into the domain of the causal, of which I will speak now more, because each state of consciousness is also represents a specific plane of existence. It's only natural. Waking state of consciousness, when the senses are active, and what the senses require. Senses require this body to function, correct? Me, if I'm wrong. the cognitive responses are required. Hence, waking state of consciousness is fully expressed, right, through this physical body. Dreaming state of consciousness is a subtler realm, and it expresses itself through the subtle body, astral body. When all this is being withdrawn, the waking, the dreaming, it is being withdrawn into the causal realm, into the realm of a deep sleep. Causal, in Sanskrit, is known as karmic. Literally. This is why we don't know karma, we have no idea of the deep sleep state of consciousness. Why? Because mind has no access there. Mind is idle. Mind ceases to exist, so to speak. The vibrations of the mind cease to exist because it is being withdrawn into the deep sleep. Now, all these three states, as it were, they are varying degrees of frequency of vibration that all rotate around the one and the only, as tradition calls it, the Turiya, the transcendent. And don't get me wrong, when I said there are 4 states of consciousness, it's to give you a very, very basic picture relevant to all traditions. But then some masters prefer to gradate that Turiya to a progressively subtler states. So for instance, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi notoriously brought 7 states of consciousness. The 3 relative ones, and then there were the Turiya. Turiya was then divided into 3 further states of consciousness, of which we have been speaking about during our gathering. They are cosmic, God, and unity. Remember? So, what is the connection between all of them? How this whole thing works? Well, if we understand, or if we take the stand view that the 3, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, are changing by their very nature, and their impermanence is due to the fact of that changeability. In a way, this also gives a credibility to the Vedantic or Vedic system, or Vedic view of Maya, because they are considered to be unreal on the account of their impermanence. The only real is Turiya here, that transcendent. Turiya literally means beyond. Beyond means beyond these 3. And this transcendent state is what illumines the states that come and go. There's no way for waking, dreaming, deep sleep have actuality of their own unless they are illumined by that light of Turiya. So even in a deep sleep state of consciousness, when normally we experience that blackness, that blankness, what is deep sleep state of consciousness? You wake up out of that state and you say, I have no dreams, nothing. There was absolutely nothing in my dreams. And then you would be asked, how do you know there was nothing? Obviously, because there was a witness. You are that witness. If there was complete cessation, if the deep sleep state of consciousness was a complete cessation of everything, there will be no possibility to tell anything about it. There will be nothing to write home about it. When you come out of that state, you are certain that I slept well and I had no dreams. I'm not attributing it to my partner. I'm very certain that I had no dreams, dear. So this is what stands as a confirmation that that state, although totally opaque, still has to be illumined by the light of consciousness, which is Turiya. So these 4 states of consciousness is, in a way, like ABC of spiritual literacy. To understand how the spirit works in various and through various realms, it's paramount to have a very clear idea how these states function, how they are subordinate to each other, how they relate, what is the connection between them when one gives way to the other. If you are tempted to ask me to deepen, and I will speak a little bit after on the higher states of consciousness, it's my responsibility to convey that, what my own teacher spoke about, right? Cosmic God unity, even just a little bit. But I want to expound a little bit more on the waking, dreaming, deep sleep. If you were to ask, let's say, are they monotonous or homogeneous? Is there such thing like waking full stop, and then boom, dreaming full stop, and then again switch, deep sleep, right? But it's logical, isn't it? A kind of a question aching itself to be introduced, like what is really here being at play? Because that's not our experience when we lie down in bed, or even when we, like that example, I love that example because it's very, very telling. When you're not driving and you've been tired, and it's already quite late, and you're sitting next to the driver, right? Your attention obviously not on the road, and you start dozing. And you half kind of present and half absent. At some points you have to like, what were you saying, dear? And like, you blanked out momentarily. But there is a room between, a gap, a corridor, or whatever you call it. There is an additional state of consciousness, as it were, or whatever we might call it. There is something as a transition between. So what is happening actually is that within each of these 3 states of consciousness, 3 are present. In other words, within waking, there is waking in waking, dreaming in waking, and deep sleep in waking. Entiendo? Within the dreaming state of consciousness, likewise, there is a waking in dreaming, dreaming in dreaming, deep sleep in dreaming. And in deep sleep state of consciousness, there is waking in deep sleep, dreaming in deep sleep, and deep sleep in a deep sleep. Deep sleep in a deep sleep is when you cannot tell a thing, you cannot tell a fly from, you cannot tell a thing, it's pitch black. For obvious reasons. So that gives you a little bit more in-depth and a richer understanding of how these states of consciousness operate. And again, don't take anything for granted. You notice how throughout waking state of consciousness you can experience, right, dozing.
Yes, here.
You planned that.
So, and not just that, experience it within yourself, not just in someone else.
Is lucid dreaming the state of waking within dreaming? Like when you're aware that you're dreaming and you're consciously choosing the dream to...
No. Lucid dreaming is yet another phenomenon altogether.
Right.
We will come to that. First, I want you to point you towards examples that you can then savor yourself. For instance, waking and waking is when maximum coherence and maximum body and mind coordination. As an athlete, if you perform in that state, you are at your peak. It's waking and waking. Everything is, you know, all these electrical impulses, all these signals, you know. If you play ping pong, you'll be good, better. If your partner now not in that same state, he has less chances. So this insofar as that, because that there is a maximum involvement of the senses and the mind. Senses are fully awake, not withdrawn at all. They are real instrumentality at the disposal of the mind. In dreaming and waking, it's that kind of, we walk around and daydreaming a little bit, you know? Very subtle. It's like doing something, just, you know, very often gets unnoticed. It gets noticed if we had several sleepless nights, and we'll be drawn into that state many times in a waking state. You know, like that tiredness would take over. The nervous system wants to fire with different frequency, but you have to be awake. But it is experienced on a regular basis, even if you slept well. So don't get me wrong. As I said, each three present in each and every one of them. Deep sleep in waking. It's that before we go to sleep, that what gives us that unmistakable, I am really ready to sleep. Even if you're not going to slide into a deep sleep, which is very unlikely, but that's what gives you that really a sleepy feeling. You put your head on a pillow, and while still something happening, you know, in a room or around you, you're already asleep. Very easy, because the shift in consciousness took place. Change in consciousness, change in vibration. And the same could be applied to others. Lucid dreaming is altogether a different phenomenon. Lucid dreaming is more to do with waking up from a deep sleep and knowing that I slept well, because there was a witness of that. What happens is that Turiya is get overshadowed in both. It's get overshadowed in all three. But in waking state of consciousness, Turiya is overshadowed by the activity of the senses working in conjunction with the mind. In dreaming state of consciousness, Turiya is overshadowed by the vibrations of the dreaming state of consciousness, right? By the vibration of the subtle realm. And in a deep sleep state of consciousness, it is overshadowed by the karmic realm, by the density of the causal realm. However, with the dawn of witness, which is fostered in meditations, right? And all of us possess that to a different degree, although all of us forever abide in Turiya. The way it manifests, or the way it is being experientially available, differs. But with practice, there is this development of witnessing state. A lot is being spoken about that. Witnessing state of consciousness is characterized precisely by remaining a witness to whatever is being experienced. And that is the basis of lucid dreaming. You witness, you glide over, and you still see the dreams. Your consciousness, as it were, entertains itself on two planes. On one, it watches the dream, and on the other, it glides over and observes it. The art of lucid dreaming, ultimately speaking, as I've been told, is in actually directing that whole thing. Having that eye of an observer and actually conducting this whole thing.
Yes, I do that.
Yeah. Carlos Castaneda made system out of it, isn't it? He made a living out of it. Whether this is useful or not is another matter. You know, it depends what our real objective is. But they say, and we say the scriptures and some authorities, some traditions, some more direct, others a bit less, that it is witnessing through the deep sleep that real indication of how well witness is developed. Rick Archer calls it acid test. If you watch his programs, that's what he calls it, acid test. Yeah, so this is what witnessing state of consciousness is. It's when it can penetrate, when the light of your awareness can penetrate through the dark veil of deep sleep, then you truly see. Then you never lose it. Then the waking, dreaming, deep sleep have been transcended. That's why we say Yogi never sleeps. Not that he doesn't go to bed or doesn't sleep. He cannot sleep. As consciousness, I cannot sleep. As consciousness, you cannot sleep. It's an oxymoron. Now that is an oxymoron. But it doesn't mean that you don't go to the, you don't lie down and you don't see dreams and you don't abide in a deep sleep state of consciousness. Your nervous system would not be able to take it. This physiology still have to be respected. But as a being of unity, you don't sleep. And if we apply that understanding, then how can we say that if I don't sleep, then am I awake? You see? Am I awake? And what would you call that then? Am I forever awake? I'll leave that to you to contemplate. It's an interesting one. But that's essentially what states of consciousness are in relation to your own awareness. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep. Ad nauseum. Until we nauseate. And this is Paramahamsa Yogananda, like the nauseating wheel of samsara. Until you, the Atman no longer can watch that, like waking, dreaming, deep sleep, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, waking, dreaming, deep sleep. And then it wakes up. And wakes up to itself, and it is seen for what it is. And so the Turiya is also how the Turiya could be understood here. Even within the tradition where Turiya is not given such an elaborate exposition as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi expounded on, there is still a term Turiyatita, literally beyond of the beyond. If Turiya is beyond, Turiyatita is beyond of the beyond. This is really, really where consciousness, even when we abide as consciousness, we begin to taste the depth of that. So it's not just like some kind of homogeneous. This is why I say we never walk into that kind of thing, awake and just be with all these talks, blah, blah, blah for me. Sorry, I have no patience for that. You do not jump from sleeping. There is still some kind of transition, even when we apply that to these three states of consciousness. You gradually dream or deep sleep recedes and you wake up. In the realm of the awakening, when consciousness, when the witness actualized and we cognize ourselves for who we are, we cognize that that's the witness first. In that state, usually we experience reality as torn between real and unreal, and that is a legitimate state. In that state of witness, we usually, and it is normal, we experience that realization of inner glory and the world projected through the senses. And often it pales in comparison. Often it pales in comparison, hence this whole notion of real and unreal. Of course, when the witness is fully plumb, you are so full of yourself that everything that is outside of you perceived as less. Simply as that, as less. And the world becomes transparent. Transparent. And that obviously introduces this phase of dissociation, you know. In a healthy stage, I call it unplugging. It's a good stage when plug, all these associative cortexes are getting unplugged, so that nothing goes in this automated, you know, like a machine, gut and brain reaction. But it's unplugged, and then in that unplugged state, we might be very, very disinterested in what's going on around. But it's a very, very necessary state. A dispassion is being experienced and savored in that state and not in any other. But, and I would introduce that, it helps to have a healthy ground in terms of our platform of understanding. Whatever then the teaching we lean on, if the teaching is that's all there is, that, you know, then we will disregard the preciousness of embodying it fuller. If tradition and our knowledge tells us that that's only half the story, then the work continues. And the integration is the term. The embodiment is the job. And that is a very different phase. Very, very beautiful phase. Because then that what has been seen through and with a fair amount of dispassion is then being re-embraced, re-evaluated, recognized. And then, again, in every blade of grass and in every grain of sand, we see the whole entire creation. So, these states of consciousness within the Turiya were delineated by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi as cosmic, God and unity. In cosmic state of consciousness is that witnessing state of consciousness. It's that being awakened to the self. The self beholds everything. It beholds everything, but yet does not recognize itself in everything. It beholds everything in detachment. It is necessary state. This is cosmic state of consciousness. This is already a liberation. The good news, if the body drops away, you are already cut asunder the wheel of samsara. This is already a state of jivan mukta, traditionally speaking. Liberated while in the body. But the work continues. And then it progresses into a greater subtlety. Within that Turiya, there are gradations, intensities, if you will. And hence, God consciousness. God consciousness is that refinement of perception, celestial perception. Everything becomes divine. Everything becomes divine. Hence, it's God consciousness. You see everything with an eye of God. Through an eye of God and with an eye of God. Relationships, connections, events, experiences, objects. Everything is being seen in that light. It's literally known as celestial perception. God consciousness. Yet there is still a faint remnants of subject and object. There's still this reference point. I'm having that celestial perception, right? Until gradually, very gradually, very gradually, very tenderly, and very intimately, subject and object, or the gap between, begins to bridge until there is no more. In other words, subject either drowns in object or dissolves in it. In Indian tradition, it gives the simple example: a doll made of salt being given to the sea. And there is a phase when it's still a doll, but its edges get smoothened and it gradually melts. It's a dawn of unity consciousness. In unity consciousness, there's no distinction, no differentiation. And again, it's not that you fail to see, this is what may be hard to imagine, that you don't fail to see the other, the tree, or a dog, or a moon. You don't fail to recognize who's your partner and who's your sister, who's your child and who is a child of your neighbor. But you see them all as your own self, and you cannot help but seeing it in that way. Not because you want to see it that way, that's the way of unity. You see? So it's subtler than the God consciousness. In God consciousness, there's still this adoration, this celestial perception. In unity consciousness, there is no you and no God, because you and God become one. And when that happens, there's no you without God, and there's no God without you. Two do not exist. They merged one inside the other. It's not enough to say one absolved the other. Both absolved each other. It's not enough to say it's just that subject drowned in object. Even God is an object in this case. No. In that experiencing in unity consciousness, that dissolution, that dissolving, is equally applicable to two sides. You see? Because once that gap is breached, we cannot tell them apart. We cannot. This is unity consciousness. It's a natural state. It's your natural state. It's a natural state of consciousness, prior to any differentiation. It's something which is available for human nervous system to experience and live. So why not? This is why the German philosopher spoke very poignantly when he said that religion is something to prevent man from direct experience of God. Because if the basis of religion is always on the grandeur of God without recognition of our unity with that God is within, then we are forever left in that rupture. I hope that makes sense to you. So this, in as much as the states of consciousness, and I hope it kind of clarifies on how each one is related to the other. Obviously, when we spoke about how each state of consciousness is being the manifestation of the gross, subtle, and causal. Turiya is beyond. It's beyond the gross, beyond the physical. It's beyond the subtle, beyond the astral, and it's beyond the karmic, beyond the causal. For Turiya, there is no karma. For Turiya, there is nothing that is subtle. For Turiya, there is nothing that is gross. From the perspective of consciousness, it's all oneness. But when that experience is particularized, right? When perception and perspective is from within of any of these particular coming and going states of consciousness, then it appears as if this is being experienced by me as being awake, going to sleep, having a deep sleep. Yet as consciousness you never sleep. You cannot sleep and you cannot be awake. So in a way, when someone says that all this awakening business is also, yes, if that is accompanied by that understanding, then I agree. There cannot be awakening for that which is forever awake. How could that be? Likewise, there is no slamming into ignorance for that which is forever light unto itself.